Hare Krishna. Welcome back to the live studios here in Radha Lane, right next to Shri Shri Radha Nilamadhava Mandir, ISKCON of Houston, Texas. Everything's big in Texas. So the mandir here is the biggest in North America. Okay, so we've started our reading of Srimad-Bhagavatam, very auspicious. Started on the disappearance of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and we just finished the first 3 verses of the first chapter of the first canto, which more or less are the Mangala Charana verses, which describe the whole subject matter in a nutshell. And now the Bhagavatam is going to begin. Before we start, welcome to everyone who's out there in cyberspace, wherever you are, whatever country you're in, whatever city you're in. Welcome. We got the news yesterday that we've passed over 600 followers in this fan page. So this is a source of great bliss for us. And before we start, let us hear the beautiful Bhagavatam Glorification by Sanatana Goswami, which is verses 412 through 416 in his work Sri Krishna Lila Stava. This is a very special work by Sanatana Goswami. He wrote it after he compiled the Brihat Bhagavatamrita, which was his major work. And it gives a very simple summary in very simple Sanskrit of the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan. And his aim was to offer 108 obeisances to the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan. These verses are the 107th obeisance to the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan, and it's actually a glorification of the Srimad-Bhagavatam itself. And it goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdipi Yusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of light to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad-Bhagavata Prabho Kalidvandoditaditya Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad-Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshaksharaya Te Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguru Mad Mahadana Man Nishtadaka Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu Sadhu Tadayin Adini Chochatakara Hanamunchagadachin Mam Prem Narit Kantayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Hare Krishna. So in this last verse, Sanatana Goswami removes all of our excuses. So we may think, oh, I'm too fallen. But here he says, the Bhagavatam is the exalter of the most fallen. So even if you're the most fallen, you still qualify As a matter of fact, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a verse in which Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says that Lord Chaitanya's mercy naturally flows down to the most fallen. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, we have come to the fourth verse. Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 4. Once, in a holy place, in the forest of Naimisharanya, great sages, headed by the sage Shonaka, assembled to perform a great 1,000-year sacrifice for the satisfaction of the Lord and his devotees. Purport. The prelude of the Srimad-Bhagavatam was spoken in the previous 3 shlokas. Now, the main topic of this great literature is being presented. Srimad-Bhagavatam, after its first recitation by Srila Shukadev Goswami, was repeated for the second time at Naimisharanya. In the Vayaviya Tantra, it is said that Brahma, the engineer of this particular universe, contemplated a great wheel which could enclose the universe. The hub of this great circle was fixed at a particular place known as Naimisharanya. Similarly, there is another reference to the forest of Naimisharanya in the Varaha Purana, where it is stated that by performance of sacrifice at this place, the strength of demoniac people is curtailed. Thus, Brahmanas prefer Naimisharanya for such sacrificial performances. The devotees of Lord Vishnu offer all kinds of sacrifices for his pleasure. The devotees are always attached to the service of the Lord, whereas fallen souls are attached to the pleasures of material existence. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that anything performed in the material world for any reason other than for the pleasure of the Lord Vishnu causes further bondage for the performer. It is enjoined, therefore, that all acts must be performed sacrificially for the satisfaction of Vishnu and his devotees. This will bring everyone peace and prosperity. The great sages are always anxious to do good to the people in general. And as such, the sages headed by Shonaka and others assembled at this holy place of Naimisharanya with a program of performing a great and continuous chain of sacrificial ceremonies. Forgetful men do not know the right path for peace and prosperity. However, the sages know it well, and therefore, for the good of all men, they are always anxious to perform acts which may bring about peace in the world. They are sincere friends to all living entities, and at the risk of great personal inconvenience, they are always engaged in the service of the Lord for the good of all people. Lord Vishnu is just like a great tree, and all others, including the demigods, men, siddhas, charanas, vidyadharas, and other living entities, are like branches, twigs, and leaves of that tree. By pouring water on the root of the tree, all the parts of the tree are automatically nourished. Only those branches and leaves which are detached cannot be so satisfied. Detached branches and leaves dry up gradually, despite all watering attempts. Similarly, human society, when it is detached from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, like detached branches and leaves, is not capable of being watered. And one attempting to do so is simply wasting his energy and resources. The modern materialistic society is detached from its relation to the Supreme Lord. and all its plans which are being made by atheistic leaders are sure to be baffled at every step. Yet they do not wake up to this. In this age, the congregational chanting of the holy names of the Lord is the prescribed method for waking up. The ways and means are most scientifically presented by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and intelligent persons may take advantage of his teachings in order to bring about real peace and prosperity. Srimad-Bhagavatam is also presented for the same purpose, and this will be explained more specifically later in the text. Text 5. One day, after finishing their morning duties by burning a sacrificial fire and offering a seat of esteem to Srila Sutta Goswami, the great sages made inquiries with great respect about the following matters. Purport. Morning is the best time to hold spiritual services. The great sages offered the speaker of the Bhagavatam an elevated seat of respect called the Vyasasan, or the seat of Sri Vyasadeva. Sri Vyasadeva is the original spiritual preceptor for all men, and all other preceptors are considered to be his representatives. A representative is one who can exactly present the viewpoint of Sri Vyasadeva. Sri Vyasadeva impregnated the message of Bhagavatam unto Srila Shukadeva Goswami, and Sri Sutta Goswami heard it from him, Sri Shukadeva Goswami. All bona fide representatives of Sri Vyasadeva in the chain of disciplic succession are to be understood to be Goswamis. These Goswamis restrain all their senses, and they stick to the path made by the previous acharyas. The Goswamis do not deliver lectures on the Bhagavatam capriciously. Rather, they execute their services most carefully, following the predecessors who delivered the spiritual message unbroken to them. Those who listen to the Bhagavatam may put questions to the speaker in order to elicit the clear meaning, but this should not be done in a challenging spirit. One must submit questions with a great regard for the speaker and the subject matter. This is also the way recommended in Bhagavad Gita. One must learn the transcendental subject by submissive oral reception from the right sources. Therefore, these sages address the speaker, Sutta Goswami, with great respect. Text 6. The sages said, "Respected Sutta Goswami, you are completely free from all vice. You are well versed in all the scriptures famous for religious life, and in the Puranas and the histories as well, for you have gone through them under proper guidance and have also explained them." Purport. A Goswami, or the bona fide representative of Sri Vyasadeva, must be free from all kinds of vices. The four major vices are 1. Illicit connection with women, 2. Animal slaughter, 3. Intoxication, 4. Speculative gambling of all sorts. A Goswami must be free from all these vices before he can dare sit on the Vyasasan. No one should be allowed to sit on the Vyasasana who is not spotless in character and who is not freed from the above-mentioned vices. He should not only be freed from all such vices, but also be well versed in all revealed scriptures or in the Vedas. The Puranas are also parts of the Vedas, and histories like the Mahabharata or Ramayana are also parts of the Vedas. The Acharya or the Goswami must be well acquainted with these literatures. To hear and explain them is more important than reading them. Repeat that. To hear and explain them is more important than reading them. One can assimilate the knowledge of the revealed scriptures only by hearing and explaining. Hearing is called Shravana, and explaining is called Kirtana. Two processes of Shravana and Kirtana are of primary importance to progressive spiritual life. Only one who has properly grasped the transcendental knowledge from the right source by submissive hearing can properly explain the subject. Text 7. Being the eldest learned Vedantist, O Sutta Goswami, you are acquainted with the knowledge of Vyasadeva, who is the incarnation of Godhead, and you also know other sages who are fully versed in all kinds of physical and metaphysical knowledge. Purport. Srimad-Bhagavatam is a natural commentation on the Brahma Sutra, or the Badarayani Vedanta Sutras. It is called natural because Vyasadeva is the author of both the Vedanta Sutras and Srimad-Bhagavatam, or the essence of all Vedic literatures. Besides Vyasadeva, there are other sages who are the authors of 6 different philosophical systems, namely Gautama, Kanada, Kapila, Patanjali, Jaimini, and Ashtavakra. Theism is explained completely in the Vedanta Sutra, whereas in other systems of philosophical speculations, practically no mention is given to the ultimate cause of all causes. One can sit on the Vyasasana only after being conversant in all systems of philosophy, so that one can present fully the theistic views of the Bhagavatam in defiance of all other systems. Srila Sutta Goswami was the proper teacher, and therefore the sages at Naimisharanya elevated him to the Vyasasana. Srila Vyasadeva is designated herein as the personality of Godhead because he is the authorized, empowered incarnation. Text 8. And because you are submissive, your spiritual masters have endowed you with all the favors bestowed upon a gentle disciple. Therefore you can tell us all that you have scientifically learned from them. Purport. The secret of success in spiritual life is in satisfying the spiritual master and thereby getting his sincere blessings. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur has sung in his famous 8 stanzas on the spiritual master as follows. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master. Only by his satisfaction can one please the personality of Godhead, and when he is dissatisfied, there is only havoc on the path of spiritual realization. It is essential, therefore, that a disciple be very much obedient and submissive to the bona fide spiritual master. Srila Sutta Goswami fulfilled all these qualifications as a disciple, and therefore he was endowed with all favors by his learned and self-realized spiritual masters such as Srila Vyasadeva and others. The sages of Naimisharanya were confident that Srila Sutta Goswami was bona fide. Therefore, they were anxious to hear from him. Text 9. Please, therefore, being blessed with many years, explain to us in an easily understandable way what you have ascertained to be the absolute and ultimate good for the people in general. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, worship of the Acharya is recommended. The Acharyas and Goswamis are always absorbed in thought of the well-being of the general public, especially their spiritual well-being. Spiritual well-being is automatically followed by material well-being. The Acharyas therefore give directions in spiritual well-being for people in general. Foreseeing the incompetencies of the people in this age of Kali, or the iron age of coral, the sages requested that Sutta Goswami give a summary of all revealed scriptures because the people of this age are condemned in every respect. The sages therefore inquired of the absolute good, which is the ultimate good for the people. The condemned state of affairs of the people of this age is described as follows. Text 10. O learned one, in this iron age of Kali, men almost always have but short lives. They are quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. Purport. The devotees of the Lord are always anxious for the spiritual improvement of the general public. When the sages of Naimisharanya analyzed the state of affairs of the people in this age of Kali, they foresaw that people would live short lives. In Kali Yuga, the duration of life is shortened not so much because of insufficient food, but because of irregular habits. By keeping regular habits and eating simple food, any man can maintain his health. Overeating, over-sense gratification, over-dependence on another's mercy, and artificial standards of living sap the very vitality of human energy. Therefore, the duration of life is shortened. The people of this age are also very lazy, not only materially, but in the matter of self-realization. The human life is especially meant for self-realization. That is to say, man should come to know what he is, what the world is, and what the supreme truth is. Human life is a means by which the living entity can end all the miseries of the hard struggle for life in material existence, and by which he can return to Godhead, his eternal home. But due to a bad system of education, men have no desire for self-realization. Even if they come to know about it, they unfortunately become victims of misguided teachers. In this age, men are victims not only of different political creeds and parties, but also of many different types of sense gratificatory diversions, such as cinemas, sports, gambling, clubs, mundane libraries, bad associations, smoking, drinking, cheating, pilfering, bickerings, and so on. That pretty much covers it. Their minds are always disturbed and full of anxieties due to so many different engagements. In this age, many unscrupulous men manufacture their own religious faiths, which are not based on any revealed scriptures. And very often, people who are addicted to sense gratification are attracted by such institutions. Consequently, in the name of religion, so many sinful acts are being carried on that the people in general have neither peace of mind nor health of body. The student brahmachari communities are no longer being maintained, and householders do not observe the rules and regulations of the grihastha ashrama. Consequently, the so-called vanaprasthas and sannyasis who come out of such grihastha ashramas are easily deviated from the rigid path. In the Kali Yuga, the whole atmosphere is surcharged with faithlessness. Men are no longer interested in spiritual values. Material sense gratification is now the standard of civilization. For the maintenance of such material civilizations, man has formed complex nations and communities, and there is a constant strain of hot and cold wars between these different groups. Memo to Trump. Oh, excuse me. I can't. Hare Krishna. It has become very difficult, therefore, to raise the spiritual standard due to the present distorted values of human society. The sages of Naimisharanya are anxious to disentangle all fallen souls, and here they are seeking the remedy from Srila Sutta Goswami. Text 11. There are many varieties of scriptures, and in all of them there are many prescribed duties, which can be learned only after many years of study in their various divisions. Therefore, O sage, please select the essence of all these scriptures and explain it for the good of all living beings, that by such instruction their hearts may be fully satisfied. Purport. Atma, or self, is distinguished from matter and material elements. It is spiritual in constitution, and thus it is never satisfied by any amount of material planning. All scriptures and spiritual instructions are meant for the satisfaction of this self, or Atma. There are many varieties of approaches which are recommended for different types of living beings in different times and at different places. Consequently, the numbers of revealed scriptures are innumerable. There are different methods and prescribed duties recommended in these various scriptures. Taking into consideration the fallen condition of the people in general of this age of Kali, the sages of Naimisharanya suggested that Sri Sutta Goswami relate the essence of all such scriptures, because in this age it is not possible for the fallen souls to understand and undergo all the lessons of all these various scriptures in the Varna and Ashrama system. The Varna and Ashrama society was considered to be the best institution for lifting the human being to the spiritual platform. But due to Kali Yuga, it is not possible to execute the rules and regulations of these institutions. Nor is it possible for the people in general to completely sever relations with their families, as the Varnashrama institution prescribes. The whole atmosphere is surcharged with opposition. In considering this, one can see that spiritual emancipation for the common man in this age is very difficult. The reason the sages presented this matter to Sri Sutta Goswami is explained in the following verses. Text 12. All blessings upon you, O Sutta Goswami. You know for what purpose the personality of Godhead appeared in the womb of Devaki as the son of Vasudeva. Purport. Bhagavan means the Almighty God, who is the controller of all opulences, power, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. He is the protector of his pure devotees. Although God is equally disposed to everyone, he is especially inclined to his devotees. Sat means the absolute truth, and persons who are servitors of the absolute truth are called sattvatas. And the personality of Godhead who protects such pure devotees is known as the protector of the sattvatas. Bhadram te, or blessings upon you, indicates the sage's anxiety to know the absolute truth from the speaker, Lord Sri Krishna. From the speaker. Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appeared to Devaki, the wife of Vasudeva. Vasudeva is the symbol of the transcendental position wherein the appearance of the Supreme Lord takes place. Text 13. O Sutta Goswami, we are eager to learn about the personality of Godhead and his incarnations. Please explain to us those teachings imparted by previous masters, acharyas, for one is uplifted both by speaking them and by hearing them. Purport. The conditions for hearing the transcendental message of the Absolute Truth are set forth herein. The first condition is that the audience must be very sincere and eager to hear. And the speaker must be in the line of disciplic succession from the recognized Acharya. The transcendental message of the Absolute is not understandable by those who are materially absorbed. Under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master, one becomes gradually purified. Therefore, one must be in the chain of disciplic succession and learn the spiritual art of submissive hearing. In the case of Sutta Goswami and the sages of Naimisharanya, all these conditions are fulfilled because Srila Sutta Goswami is in the line of Srila Vyasadeva, and the sages of Naimisharanya are all sincere souls who are anxious to learn the truth. Thus, the transcendental topics of Lord Sri Krishna's superhuman activities, his incarnation, his birth, appearance or disappearance, his forms, his names, and so on, are all easily understandable because all requirements are fulfilled. Such discourses help all men on the path of spiritual realization. Text 14. Living beings who are entangled in the complicated meshes of birth and death can be freed immediately by even unconsciously chanting the holy name of Krishna, which is feared by fear personified. Purport. Vasudeva, O Lord Krishna, the absolute personality of Godhead, is the supreme controller of everything, and as such he is feared by all others. There is no one in creation who was not afraid of the rage of the Almighty. Great asuras like Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, Kamsa, and others who were very powerful living entities were all killed by the personality of Godhead. And the Almighty Vasudeva has empowered his name with the powers of his personal self. Everything directly related to him is identical with him. It is stated herein that the name of Krishna is feared even by fear personified. This indicates that the name of Krishna is non-different from Krishna. Therefore, the name of Krishna is as powerful as Lord Krishna himself. There is no difference at all. Anyone, therefore, can take advantage of the holy names of Lord Sri Krishna, even in the midst of the greatest dangers. The transcendental name of Krishna, even though uttered unconsciously or by force of circumstances, can help one obtain freedom from the hurdle of birth and death. Text 15. O Sutta, those great sages who have completely taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord can at once sanctify those who come in touch with them, whereas the waters of the Ganges can sanctify only after prolonged use. Purport. Pure devotees of the Lord are more powerful than the waters of the sacred river Ganges. One can derive spiritual benefit out of prolonged use of the Ganges waters, but one can be sanctified at once by the mercy of a pure devotee of the Lord. In Bhagavad Gita it is said that any person, regardless of birth, a Shudra, woman, or merchant, can take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, and by so doing can return to Godhead. To take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord means to take shelter of the pure devotees. The pure devotees, whose only business is serving, are honored by the names Prabhupada and Vishnupada, which indicate such devotees to be representatives of the lotus feet of the Lord. Anyone, therefore, who takes shelter of the lotus feet of a pure devotee, by accepting the pure devotee as his spiritual master, can be at once purified. Such devotees of the Lord are honored equally with the Lord, because they are engaged in the most confidential service of the Lord, for they deliver out of the material world the fallen souls whom the Lord wants to return home back to Godhead. Such pure devotees are better known as vice lords, according to revealed scriptures. The sincere disciples of a pure devotee consider him equal with the Lord, but the pure devotee always considers himself to be a humble servant of the Lord. This is the pure devotional path. Text 16. Who is there desiring deliverance from the vices of the age of quarrel, who is not willing to hear the virtuous glories of the Lord? Purport. The age of Kali is the most condemned age due to its quarrelsome features. Kali Yuga is so saturated with vicious habits that there is a great fight at the slightest misunderstanding. Those who are engaged in the pure devotional service of the Lord, who are without any desire for self-aggrandizement, and who are freed from the effects of fruitive actions and dry philosophical speculations, are capable of getting out of the estrangements of this complicated age. The leaders of the people are very much anxious to live in peace and friendship, but they have no information of the simple method of hearing the glories of the Lord. On the contrary, such leaders are opposed to the propagation of the glories of the Lord. In other words, the foolish leaders want to completely deny the existence of the Lord. In the name of secular state, Such leaders are enacting various plans every year, but by the insurmountable intricacies of the material nature of the Lord, all these plans for progress are being constantly frustrated. They have no eyes to see that their attempts at peace and friendship are failing. But here is the hint to get over the hurdle. If we want actual peace, we must open the road to understand the Supreme Lord Krishna and glorify Him for His virtuous activities as they are depicted in the pages of Srimad-Bhagavatam. Text 17. His transcendental acts are magnificent and gracious, and great learned sages like Narada sing of them. Please, therefore, speak to us who are eager to hear about the adventures he performs in his various incarnations. Purport: the personality of Godhead is never inactive, as some less intelligent persons suggest. His works are magnificent and magnanimous. His creations, both material and spiritual, are all wonderful and contain all variegatedness. They are described nicely by such liberated souls as Srila Narada, Vyasa, Valmiki, Devala, Asita, Madhva, Sri Chaitanya, Ramanuja, Vishnu Swami, Nimbarka, Sridhara, Baladeva, Vishwanatha, Baladeva, Bhaktivinoda, Siddhanta Saraswati, and many other learned and self-realized souls. These creations, both material and spiritual, are full of opulence, beauty, and knowledge. But the spiritual realm is more magnificent due to its being full of knowledge, bliss, and eternity. The material creations are manifested for some time as perverted shadows of the spiritual kingdom and can be likened to cinemas. They attract people of less intelligent caliber who are attracted to false things, by false things. Such foolish men have no information of the reality, and they take it for granted that the false material manifestation is the all in all. But more intelligent men, guided by sages like Vyasa and Narada, know that the eternal kingdom of God is more delightful, larger, and eternally full of bliss and knowledge. Those who are not conversant with the activities of the Lord and His transcendental realm are sometimes favored by the Lord in His adventures as incarnations, wherein He displays the eternal bliss of His association in the transcendental realm. By such activities, He attracts the conditioned souls of the material world. Some of these conditioned souls are engaged in the false enjoyment of material senses, and others are in simply negating their real life in the spiritual world. These less intelligent persons are known as karmis, or fruitive workers, and jnanis, or dry mental speculators. But above these two classes of men is the transcendentalist known as Satvata, or the devotee, who is busy neither with rampant material activity nor with material speculation. He is engaged in the positive service of the Lord, and thereby he derives the highest spiritual benefit unknown to the karmis and jnanis. As the supreme controller of both the material and spiritual worlds, the Lord has different incarnations of unlimited categories. Incarnations like Brahma, Rudra, Manu, Prithu, and Vyasa are His material qualitative incarnations, but His incarnations like Rama, Narasingha, Varaha, and Vamana are His transcendental incarnations. Lord Sri Krishna is the fountainhead of all incarnations, and He is therefore the cause of all causes. Text 18. O wise Sutta, please narrate to us the transcendental pastimes of the Supreme Lord's multi-incarnations. Such auspicious adventures and pastimes of the Lord, the Supreme Controller, are performed by His internal powers. Purport: for the creation, maintenance, and destruction of the material worlds, the Supreme Lord, Personality of Godhead Himself, appears in many thousands of forms of incarnations, and the specific adventures found in those transcendental forms are all auspicious. Both those who are present during such activities and those who hear the transcendental narrations of such activities are benefited. Text 19. We never tire of hearing the transcendental pastimes of the Personality of Godhead, who is glorified by hymns and prayers. Those who have developed a taste for transcendental relationships with Him relish hearing of His pastimes at every moment. Purport. There's a great difference between mundane stories, fiction, or history, and the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. The histories of the whole universe contain references to the pastimes of the incarnations of the Lord. The Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and the Puranas are histories of bygone ages, recorded in connection with the pastimes of the incarnations of the Lord, and therefore remain fresh even after repeated readings. For example, anyone may read Bhagavad Gita or Srimad-Bhagavatam repeatedly throughout his whole life, and yet find in them new light of information. Mundane news is static, whereas transcendental news is dynamic, inasmuch as the spirit is dynamic and matter is static. Those who have developed a taste for understanding the transcendental subject, those who have developed a taste for understanding the transcendental subject matter are never tired of hearing such narrations. One is quickly satiated by mundane activities, but no one is satiated by transcendental or devotional activities. Uttama Shloka indicates that literature which is not meant for nations. Mundane literature is in the mode of darkness or ignorance, whereas transcendental literature is quite different. Transcendental literature is above the mode of darkness, and its light becomes more luminous and progressive with progressive reading and realization of the transcendental subject matter. The so-called liberated persons are never satisfied by the repetition of the words, Aham Brahmasmi. Such artificial realization of Brahman becomes hackneyed, and so to relish such pleasure, they turn to the narrations of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Those who are not so fortunate turn to altruism and worldly philanthropy. This means the Mayavada philosophy is mundane, whereas the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad-Bhagavatam is transcendental. Text 20. Lord Sri Krishna, the Personality of Godhead, along with Balarama, played like a human being, and so masked, he performed many superhuman acts. Purport. The doctrines of anthropomorphism and zoomorphism are never applicable to Sri Krishna or the Personality of Godhead. The theory that a man becomes God by dint of penance and austerities is very much rampant nowadays, especially in India. Since Lord Rama, Lord Krishna, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were detected by the sages and saints to be the Personality of Godhead, as indicated in revealed scriptures, many unscrupulous men have created their own incarnations. This process of concocting an incarnation of God has become an ordinary business, especially in Bengal. Any popular personality with a few traits of mystic powers will display some feat of jugglery and easily become an incarnation of God by popular vote. Lord Sri Krishna was not that type of incarnation. He was actually the Personality of Godhead from the very beginning of his appearance. He appeared before his so-called mother as four-armed Vishnu. Then, at the request of the mother, he became like a human child and at once left her for another devotee at Kukula, where he was accepted as the son of Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Mata. Similarly, Sri Baladeva, the counterpart of Lord Sri Krishna, was also considered a human child born of another wife of Sri Vasudeva. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that his birth and deeds are transcendental, and that anyone who is so fortunate as to know the transcendental nature of his birth and deeds will at once become liberated and eligible to return to the kingdom of God. So knowledge of the transcendental nature of the birth and deeds of Lord Sri Krishna is sufficient for liberation. In the Bhagavatam, the transcendental nature of the Lord is described in 9 cantos, and in the 10th canto, his specific pastimes are taken up. All this becomes known as one's reading of this literature progresses. It is important to note here, however, that the Lord exhibited his divinity even from the lap of his mother, that his deeds are all superhuman. He lifted Govardhan Hill at the age of 7. And all these acts definitely prove him to be actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yet due to his mystic covering, he was always accepted as an ordinary human child by his so-called mother and father and mother, and other relatives. Whenever some Herculean task was performed by him, the father and mother took it otherwise, and they remained satisfied with unflinching parental love for their son. As such, the sages of Naimisharanya describe him as apparently resembling a human being, but actually he is the Supreme Almighty Personality of Godhead. Text 21. Knowing well that the age of Kali has already begun, we are assembled here in this holy place to hear at great length the transcendental message of Godhead, and in this way perform sacrifice. Purport. This age of Kali is not at all suitable for self-realization by the methods practiced in Satya Yuga, the Golden Age, or Treta Yuga, or Dwapara Yugas, the Silver and Copper Ages. For self-realization, the people in Satya Yuga living a lifetime Yuga, when the duration of life was 1,000 years, self-realization was attained by worship of the Lord. But in the Kali Yuga, the maximum duration of life being 100 years only, and that combined with various difficulties, the recommended process of self-realization is that of hearing and chanting of a holy name, fame, and pastimes of the Lord. The sages of Naimisharanya began this process in a place meant specifically for the devotees of the Lord. They prepared themselves to hear the pastimes of the Lord over a period of 1,000 years. By the example of these sages, one should learn that regular hearing and recitation of the Bhagavatam is the only way for self-realization. I will repeat that. Thank you. By the example of these sages, one should learn that regular hearing and recitation of the Bhagavatam is the only way for self-realization. Hare Krishna. Other attempts are simply a waste of time, for they do not give any tangible results. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu preached this system of Bhagavata Dharma, and he recommended that all those who were born in India should take the responsibility of broadcasting the messages of Lord Sri Krishna, primarily the message of the Bhagavad Gita. And when one is well established in the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, he can take up the study of Srimad-Bhagavatam for further enlightenment in self-realization. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Text 22. We think that we have met your goodness by the will of providence, just so that we may accept you as captain of the ship for those who desire to cross the difficult ocean of Kali, which deteriorates all the good qualities of a human being. Purport. The age of Kali is very dangerous for the human being. Human life is simply meant for self-realization, but due to this dangerous age, men have completely forgotten the aim of life. In this age, the lifespan will gradually decrease. People will gradually lose their memory, finer sentiments, strength, and better qualities. A list of the anomalies of this age is given in the 12th canto of this work. And so this age is very difficult for those who want to utilize this life for self-realization. The people are so busy with sense gratification that they completely forget about self-realization. Out of madness, they frankly say that there is no need for self-realization because they do not realize that this brief life is but a moment on our great journey towards self-realization. The whole system of education is geared to sense gratification. And if a learned man thinks it over, he sees that the children of this age are being intentionally sent to the slaughterhouses of so-called education. Learned men, therefore, must be cautious of this age. And if they'd all want to cross over the dangerous ocean of Kali, they must follow the footsteps of the sages of Naimisharanya and accept Sri Sutta Goswami or his bona fide representative as the captain of the ship. The ship is the message of Lord Sri Krishna in the shape of Bhagavad Gita or of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. When Prabhupada was coming over on the boats, the Jaladuta, he had 2 heart attacks. And after the second one, he prayed to Krishna. And that night, Krishna came to him in a dream, and he was rowing a boat. And he said, "Don't worry, everything's going to be okay. Just write these books." And that next morning, the ocean became like silk, like no way. This is Atlantic Ocean. This is no joke, you know. And the captain of the ship said, "We've never had a crossing like this. This person who we're carrying is not an ordinary person." So, you know, I've taken this up as a vow in my life to read Prabhupada's books out loud like this to whoever wants to hear for the rest of my life, every day. That's it. And now, as we're reading this, because, you know, I started 4.5 years ago, this vow. This is my third time to the Bhagavatam in that amount of time. And I've been through Chaitanya Charitamrita 3 times also, Bhagavad Gita 5 times. And I can understand, each time I read it, I can understand that the person that they're talking about here is Prabhupada. You know, in terms of being the captain of our ship. Because this ISKCON movement is like a ship, you know, and we're all there, and we're all in the ship, and we're bumping into each other and bumping our head, you know, when the waves start to go like this, you know. Even some people think, "Oh, this is too dangerous, let me jump off the ship," and they jump in the ocean and drown. But you got to stay in the ship, you know, and keep hearing from Prabhupada direct. And I can't think of any better way, you know, than just reading his words like this, and then discussing and answering questions. And I'll try my best after we finish the reading to answer questions from whatever I've heard from Prabhupada. Text 23. Since Sri Krishna, the Absolute Truth, the Master of all mystic powers, has departed for his own abode, please tell us to whom the religious principles have now gone for shelter. Purport. Religion consists of the prescribed codes enunciated by the personality of Godhead himself. Whenever there is a gross misuse or neglect of the principles of religion, the Supreme Lord appears himself to restore religious principles. This is stated in Bhagavad Gita 4:8. Here the sages of Naimisharanya are inquiring about these principles. The reply to this question is given later. The Srimad-Bhagavatam is the transcendental sound representation of the personality of Godhead, and thus it is the full representation of transcendental knowledge and religious principles. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the first canto, first chapter of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled Questions by the Sages. Hare Krishna. So we'll stop the reading here and ask if there are any questions by the sages. Anything that stuck out in your mind, anything you're curious about. These purports are pretty clear, crystal clear, self-explanatory. Still, sometimes there are questions. Yes.
How can philanthropy exist here? Those who are not so fortunate turn to altruism and low philanthropy. If you're doing philanthropy in the name of God, is it considered devotion or still worldly?
Philanthropy means to do good for people's bodies. A philanthropist is building a hospital or feeding people or opening a school. That's philanthropy.
Yeah, or like taking care of orphans, giving them
Taking care of orphans.
So that's still
Philanthropy.
Still not.
Yeah, because we may take care of the body and we make him take it comfortable. We're not trying to say that we should torture people and not help them at all. But you feed somebody and then they get hungry again. You take care of them for a while if they're orphans, and then at some point they're gone, and they do what they want to do, and they take another body, and they take another birth, and maybe they become orphans again, or maybe not. But, as long as we don't help people with the real problems of life, then philanthropy and such charitable activities, which are not bad. If you remember in the 12th chapter of the Gita, Krishna recommends that. If he recommends that you fix your mind on him 24/7. And if you can't do that, then be honest and follow the principles, the bhakti yogic principles of bhakti yoga, regulative principles. And if you can't do that for some reason, then work for Krishna. And if you can't do that, then do something for your nation or for your family, or for selflessly work and give up the fruits to somebody else. And if you can't do that, then cultivate knowledge. And better than knowledge is meditation or contemplating the knowledge. Better than that is giving up the fruits of one's activity. So if there's a train of activities, but each one of them, according to Krishna himself, who's the absolute authority and who set this whole thing up properly. It's not that we can make it up. We can't make anything up on our own. He gives us this gradual elevation that practically everybody fits into. With the idea in each verse that it takes you to the next place. It takes you to the next place. It takes you to the next place. But if you do one of those things without the goal of progress, of going forward, of making progress, then you stay in that position. And then when you take another body, then you have to take another body and start all over again from scratch, really. But anything you do for the service of the Lord, that is beyond philanthropy. It is beyond charity and those things. Therefore, devotional service, pure devotional service, is highly recommended So what?
After devotional, or was that?
It was demoniac.
What?
Demoniac. She would ask people at the end of their lives what they want, and whatever they wanted, she would give them. Did you know that? Did you know that? You can go to any of her hospitals or any other places, and they take care of people, and sometimes they're dying, and whatever they ask for, they would give, whether it be meat or drugs or anything, she would give them. Yes. And everyone in the world worships her.
What was it, like the last rite? She thought
Yeah.
was the animal?
Yeah. It's a principle.
Yeah.
Person's dying. You know, even if a person, if they're in a prison and they're on death row, then they say, you know, what do you want? And then they say, I want a steak and a chocolate fudge ice cream and this and that and the other thing, or whatever they give them.
It's not good to comfort them in that way when they're dying? Is there a better
You're
way?
giving them a sinful thing to do, and they do it. They take the reaction. Then they take the birth as a hog or a dog or a tiger or an elephant or anything, or a worm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hannah is going to ask a question. Hannah the banana. Go ahead.
15 says,
In text 15 it says,
such devotees to be representatives
such devotees to be representatives
of the lotus feet
of the lotus feet of the Lord.
Anyone
Anyone
therefore who takes
therefore who takes shelter of the lotus feet of a pure devotee by accepting the pure devotee as the spiritual master can be at once purified. Such devotees of the Lord are honored equally with the Lord because they are engaged in the most confidential service of the Lord, for they deliver out of the material world the fallen souls whom the Lord wants to return back home, back to God. So,
Jesus did this.
Jesus did this.
Prabhupada did this.
Prabhupada did this.
Why is Jesus considered the Son and Prabhupada not?
Why is Jesus considered?
The Son of God, but Prabhupada not.
Because people are speculating. Prabhupada is the Son of God, but they're speculating because they're being taught by religious teachers who are not actually following exactly the teachings of the original preceptor. And this is what Krishna says in the Gita. Evam parampara praptam imam raja shayovidu sakala neha mahata yogo nashta parantapa. Nashta means to scatter, to diffuse. So this teaching is coming down from parampara, from Krishna to, anyway, from one representative of Krishna to another, and when it becomes broken, then Krishna comes himself, or he sends his son, which means a person who is especially empowered by him, or pure devotee. The son is also a pure devotee. So over time, practically every religious system becomes confused over time. Because time is Krishna. Kalosmi, Krishna says. I am time. More powerful than anything or anyone. So time causes us to forget. Everyone knows that time causes us to forget. We can't even remember. What were you doing 6 months and 3 days ago, at such and such a time? That's the effect of time. So when and it mentioned in here, even if a person's sincere, in the Kali Yuga, the tendency is to meet persons who are actually not representing exactly the teachings, and they misrepresent and they mislead people from the truth. So this idea that Lord Jesus is the only way truth and the light and all these kind of things, it actually isn't inconsistent, it isn't contradictory, because you must go to a liberated soul, you must go to a representative of God in order to get these teachings at any time, in any place in the world. But sometimes it's very hard to find them. And sometimes in a large area there's only one or a few. And in India they're in the caves of the Himalayas, so they're very difficult to find. Unless they decide to come down and, associate with you, you can't even find them, practically.
But is that wrong for them to do?
No, we're not saying it's wrong. We're saying it's a little selfish.
Will they take another birth?
Well, it depends. Depends on who they are. It depends on what level of realization they've attained. It depends on their spiritual desire. But in our disciplic succession, in our line of disciplic succession, the persons who come and live with the people and try to give and help them are considered to be more elevated. It's more compassionate. It's more kind. It's more benevolent. But it's not that it's wrong for a person to go into a cave and just, if the person is actually meditating on Krishna, and if the person is actually performing pure devotional service, and they'll go to be with Krishna. But in Kali Yuga, that process is recommended for another age, when lifespans were longer, when people's bodies and minds were stronger, and they had more capacity to sit and meditate for long periods of time. How many people, anybody here, can sit and meditate for a long period of time? How about 10 minutes?
Meditate and think about words.
How about a year? How about 10 years? How about 100 years? How about 1,000 years? To get perfection in that process requires up to 60,000 years of constant meditation to withdraw yourself completely from the influence of the material modes of nature, which are extremely powerful because they're being controlled by Krishna. That was the Yuga Dharma. The Yuga Dharma in the Satya Yuga was meditation. The Yuga Dharma in the Treta Yuga was huge sacrificial performances that were organized by the leaders of the world, the kings. Just like recently we had our World Cup, or sometimes they have a Olympic thing, and they build a whole city, and everybody from the world comes over to watch. It's the same principle. They would do that kind of thing only just to perform a huge sacrifice for God, and all the different members of society would do their arts and their whatever they did, whether they were carpenters or craftsmen or singers and dancers and Brahmins and kings. They would all come together and they would put on this big sacrifice. And then they would all make spiritual advancement and go back to spiritual world, because that was the Yuga Dharma. And in the Dwapara Yuga, as was mentioned in one of the purports, the process recommended was deity worship, was worshiping in the temples. But in this age, the method is recommended, the chanting of the holy names and hearing of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. That's why it's so important, that verse that said, so when Krishna left, where did the shelter go? And it's right there. It went to the Srimad-Bhagavatam and the holy name. So sometimes devotees, and this is why I've taken this vow, to hear the Srimad-Bhagavatam straight for at least an hour, and more. I like to more, but I don't have enough juice in my... Yeah, we have to stop this, because I'm going to explain to everyone what we're doing. We're not quite finished over here, but we're going to cut the live stream because we got a notification on my phone that I'm up to a certain amount of gigabytes, and if I'm not careful, it'll go down in speed, and we won't be able to do this through the phone. So we're going to try to find a better way, but in the meantime, I'm trying to be careful. So thank all of you from all over the world who come to hear us read the Bhagavatam. And please come back again and share it, please, with all your friends and workers and whoever. And we'll see you tomorrow. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Hare Krishna.